So Old English Morphology today, and those are the kinds of helmets that the Anglo-Saxons wore. This particular one on this picture, the bigger one, it dates back to 625. And if you remember the year when the bulk of the Anglo-Saxons came to Britannia, it was in 449, exactly. So that's that, but we're not going to be talking about helmets. We're going to be talking about Old English morphology, which is much more exciting. So, Old English, if you've read the chapter, and I'm sure you have, so Old English had all these different ways that the nouns, for instance, were signaled, or the nouns signaled a lot of different things, and then that affected the grammar of the language, the kinds of forms that you had to use. If you studied another language, you know how it works. Like, you have to know a little bit about what the category of the word is in order to make it behave according to the rules of the grammar of that language. So there were different ways of categorizing the things that a particular noun could signal. So nouns signaled, they were marked for gender. They were not marked for gender, but they had gender, grammatical gender. And I want to say a couple of words about grammatical gender. It has nothing to do with biological gender. It is, the system was exactly the same as it is in present-day German, where you have nouns that are masculine. Here's a handout. Michael. So nouns are either masculine, feminine, or neuter in present-day German, and that's how Old English was too. It had masculine, feminine, and neuter nouns, and they were, and that doesn't mean anything. Grammarians, just when they started to talk about how different languages, how the nouns in different languages behaved, they had to have a way of referring to the classes, the categories of nouns, and they could have just as well called these A nouns and B nouns and C nouns, but no, they decided to call them masculine, feminine, and neuter, and that sometimes, confuses people, because gender was totally an abstract grammatical concept and did not have anything to do with natural and biological gender. That changed, but we'll get to that. So there are some languages that indicate what the gender of the noun is, whether it's masculine or feminine. And for instance, if you know Spanish, how do you know that a noun is feminine? It ends in what? Yes. If it's masculine, it ends in o. Yes, and then we have languages that have neuter nouns. In Russian, for instance, Russian has the same system, masculine, feminine, and neuter, and it's grammatical again, but it overlaps with natural and biological gender to an extent today. So masculine nouns in Russian, they end in a consonant. Feminine nouns end in a, just like in Spanish, Indo-European languages, both. And neuter nouns in Russian end either in o or e. And it's easy when you see a noun in Russian, if you see a noun in Spanish, okay, the ending tells us what the gender of the noun is. Not so in German, not so in Old English. So I remember when I was studying German, I tried to build these silly mnemonics that, that's the feminine noun because blah, 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 and that's a masculine noun. But that has nothing to do with the meaning of the noun. Old English, interestingly, had the word for woman. It was weave, and it was neuter. And this just means that the case endings that it gets, they will be behaving like, you know, a group of nouns that all behave in that same way, and those were called neuter nouns. So weave, despite its semantics, despite its meaning, it was a neuter noun, weave. And child, the word meaning child, also neuter, but we cannot see anything at the ending there that would help us to figure this out. You just have to know. And there's another word for woman, and actually this is where our word woman comes from. It was weave man, with the double N there at the end, so just hold it a little bit longer. Weave man, and that was masculine. Man, by the way, in Old English did not necessarily mean men, it meant a human being, so this is like, we still talk about women folk, so that would be the weave man. And it was masculine. There was actually one synonym for the word woman, which was the word lady, and that was hlafdige, and its base is the word hlaf. Do you remember what hlaf meant?
Oh, loaf? No.
Loaf, yes, bread. The person who, you know, does the bread. Not sexist at all. So that's where we get lady, hlafdige. Okay. So the nominative singular, the basic form of the noun, it did not provide any clue whatsoever as to the gender of the noun. You just have to know it, and then when you have to decline it for genitive or accusative, if you need to make a possessive form of it for genitive, and if you need to make a direct object of it, if you need to make it into an indirect object like the dative case, like he gave me something, me would be in the dative form, then you would just need to know that, aha, because it's either neuter or feminine or masculine, this is the kind of an ending that we have to put to it. So if you look at the next three words there, for spirit, ghost, that's where we get ghost. So ghost, and then rest, it's identical for today, and dust for dust. These all end in st, the same consonant cluster, but that consonant cluster doesn't tell us anything. We just have to know that ghost is a masculine noun, rest is a feminine noun, and dust is a neuter noun. So when we are referring, let's go back to the words that mean roughly a woman. So when you're referring with a pronoun to the word weave, I saw a weave, I saw a woman, then you would have to use a neuter pronoun like it. Okay, I saw a woman, it was kneading dough. If the word is weave man, I saw a weave man, then we need to use a masculine pronoun for the word woman. I saw a woman, he was kneading dough. Now that's very foreign to present day English, because we make a decision about whether to say he, she, or it based on first the animate, non-animate distinction. It is not animate, or it's non-human. We can say about a cat, it, or then, you know, he and she distinction comes from knowing the biological gender of the person. And we know how complicated this has become when people say that I'm not this or that. The binary gender distinction is, you know, we need to somehow work with the pronoun system to refer to people who said I'm not this or that, and then now tend to use they because English unfortunately doesn't have a gender-neutral human pronoun. Anyway, and then only if you use the word kraftige, which was feminine in gender, then you could refer to the woman as she. So it, he, or she were all used of a female person, depending on which word weave or weavman or kraftige was first mentioned. Now, this changes during the times of Old English moving towards Middle English, and then the biological gender is started to be used to determine the pronoun substitutes. So towards Middle English, late Old English, you would use she even when referring to weave and weavemon. Does that make sense? So, yeah. So language just behaved a little bit differently. Now I have posted this PowerPoint already. I put it up there yesterday. So you don't need to copy this. It looks complicated, but we're going to go over this word by word. Another thing that we need to know about the noun system in Old English is that we need to know what kinds of endings these different masculines, neuters, and feminine nouns took, and there were different classes also within that system. So we'll be looking at the Old English noun declension, and at the very corner in green I wrote West Saxon. This table is based on the West Saxon dialect. As we talked about last week, is that we have a restricted number of texts, and they don't necessarily represent all the Old English dialects. And from West Saxon dialect, we have gotten most texts available, and those are traditionally used as the basis for these tables for the noun systems, for verb systems, and so on. So just that you know. And you may find some variation, because this is a system that radically changed over the time of Old English. And the change was, let me ask you this, did the inflectional system become simpler or more complicated over years? Simpler, yes, exactly, because today we have only 8 inflectional endings, and look at all these endings that Old English had. So nouns were also divided into strong and weak nouns, and this is nothing to do with how much weight you can lift. It's just that strong nouns tend to have more inflections, and then weak nouns, they have the same inflectional ending repeated over and over again. So that's how they show their quote-unquote weakness. Well, again, strong and weak have nothing to do with the semantics of those adjectives. They are just two different kinds of inflectional systems.
Could you also call them like regular and irregular?
Yes, it corresponds to today's words, regular and irregular, but not like overlappingly. But in the verb system we can see that kind of a yeah. So today we talk about, but it's a little bit of a different thing. Yes, but good analogy anyway. So then the nouns I have listed here They were also divided into A stems and O stems, but you can, with good conscience, ignore this distinction. Your book doesn't mention it. So it's based on a distinction that would have made sense in earlier forms of language, but by the time of Old English it doesn't make any sense anymore. I wish that my Old English teacher, rest in peace, would have told me that, because when I was sitting in your place in my Old English classes and I was like racking my brain about this A stem and O stem distinction, I couldn't make sense out of it. And then later on I read somewhere that, it had stopped making sense by the time of Old English. But sometimes these labels still stick, but you can ignore it. You do need to make a note of masculine, neuter, and feminine nouns, and then the strong versus weak. And the weak declension, it's referred to as the undeclension, simply because the un keeps repeated there in those forms. So let's look at these words. First of all, we also need to know that Old English had 4 cases. It had the nominative, which here is referred to with an N. Genitive. Best to do it in the same order. Accusative. Genitive and dative.
It's just like German.
Same as in German, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Now, Indo-European, if you remember from, we briefly went over the Indo-European cases. Indo-European had 8 cases. So by the time of Old English, 4 cases had already gotten lost. Germanic had something in between the Proto-Germanic. So Old English still has it's actively using these 4 cases: nominative, accusative, genitive, and dative. Now, what does this mean? It basically means, a whole bunch of other labels again, but the label is given. It corresponds to what a noun phrase, what a noun is doing in the sentence. If it's the subject, then it's going to be in the nominative case, like we would have they saw us. So they would be in the nominative case. In present day English, it doesn't make any more much sense to talk about cases in present day English, because we really don't have anything else than possessive and non-possessive, and then everything else is in the except in the pronouns we still have more of the Old English case system left. But for regular nouns, we don't inflect them for anything else than possessive in terms of case. Of course, we make it into plural, because that's another distinction, that nouns make singular versus plural. Except Old English had a third number. This is the number singular versus plural, and then Old English had also dual to refer to 2 of us or 2 of you. Okay, that was lost, but it's a cute thing to have. So they would be today we would say that's the subject form of the pronoun they. Now, if you say we saw these people, this word would need to be in a different form in present day English. What is that? Yeah. So this is a remnant of the accusative, actually, collapsed dative and accusative, but still. So this is the object form, and in Old English it would have been called the accusative case. And accusatives are used for direct objects, mainly for direct objects in Old English. So nominative case for subjects and some other functions as well. I gave you that handout and you have it all listed there, the different functions for these cases. Accusatives mostly for direct objects. So I'm going to put here subject because that was the main function, and the accusative was mainly used for direct objects, but also for other functions, like in that handout you'll see that. Now, genitive corresponds to what notion in present day English? Possession. So here, oh, by the way, here we have us as what would correspond to the Old English accusative, because that's the direct object, and this would correspond to the Old English nominative because it's the subject. So we still have a different form because pronouns are of course used very frequently, and they are resistant to change because they have been used so frequently. So we still have these Old English categories visible here. So genitive refers to possession, is used for possession, and dative is something we don't have anymore, but we do have indirect objects, and that was the main function for datives, the basic function for indirect object like beneficiary or recipient. He gave me the book, beneficiary or recipient. Okay, so these would be the basic syntactic functions within the sentence that these cases were realizing in a way. In addition, the cases were also required after certain prepositions. So exactly like in German, you have to memorize this string of prepositions that requires like the dative case. An, auf, hinter, im, über, fort, zwischen, I think. Do I still remember it from my high school German? And then a longer list for accusatives. So it was the same thing in Old English, that some prepositions required dative. Actually, most prepositions required the dative case coming after it, and accusative was also required by a lot of prepositions. So just like in present day English, he gave the book, we can't say to I or to he, it has to be to me or to him. So we have to inflect I and he if it comes after a preposition. So present day English has the same system yet, still. Okay. Now let's look at these words, and let's start from the masculine strong noun bought, which means boat. Bought became boat, and that happened actually in early modern English when the great vowel shift happened. But whenever you see the long ah in present day English, think about changing it into O, and that would be the present day English, just the rule of thumb. Bought is the same as boat. So the nominative form for bought was bought, accusative was the same, no difference there. Just like in today's English, present day English, we would say the boat is big, we saw a boat. The boat doesn't change its form, it was already that way in Old English. And then genitive was the form bates, and the dative had an E at the end, a letter E, the sound E, and it was actually pronounced. There were no silent ending E's yet in Old English. Once we get to Middle English, then that happens. But so we had bates, bate, and then the plural batas, genitive bata, like the sides of the ships, many ships' sides, so that would be bata. And dative plural batum, like they gave the boats a paint job or whatever. So, so let's read these all together and just repeat after me. Bat, bat, bates, bate, batas, bata, batum. Very good. So you notice, by the way, in the plural, boats and boats, the nominative and accusative have collapsed. So this system in Old English, it did not make the maximum number of different distinctions anymore. It didn't. A lot of these things had already collapsed, even though this is a strong noun, so it has more than the weak nouns, more endings than the weak nouns, but already there we see this collapse of nominative and accusative plural, and also the nominative and accusative singular. But those are listed as separate there, because once we move to the right on the columns, you'll see that the forms may be different for different kinds of nouns. So neuter nouns behaved very similarly often to masculine nouns, but they still had some differences to the paradigm. So we have the word folk, and it was the same, folk. So let's read these. Folk, folk, folkes, folke, and then the plurals, folk, folka, folkum. So what you notice is the singular folk and the plural folk, identical forms, both in nominative and accusative. And this is exactly what is the basis of what we have a remnant of in present day English. We've got words that for which singular and plural is the same. Animal terms like sheep, one sheep, many sheep, one deer, many deer. And we sometimes still use, I think, the word folk in the plural meaning, don't we? Yes. So this is a long tradition, but because language has a tendency to regularize the plurals in present-day English, they have regularized to the plurals like batas with the s at the end. It's not us anymore, as, but s at the end. In present-day English, the vast majority of the plurals, but we have these remnants of Old English cases that left. And this is what is beautiful about knowing about the history of English, is that what, from the point of view of the present-day English speaker, seems like, oh, this is crazy, it's just a quirk of English. They typically have very rational Old English explanations, or earlier, not necessarily Old English only, but historical explanations for why we talk about sheep and fish and deer and deer. Okay, so then we have another slightly different declension for another neuter kind of noun, and this is exemplified here by the word ship, which is today's ship. It's just written with SC in Old English, and as you remember, it used to be pronounced as skip, like what do you call the skipper? We still have skipper. That is a Scandinavian borrowing, later Scandinavian borrowing. So Old English sk forms, which are indicated by the graphemes SC, but pronunciation was SK, it became sh. So it's an Old English word if it has undergone this change from sk to sh. Okay, so anyway, so we have ship. Let's read these also. You'll notice that there's a different plural ending coming up, but just repeat: ship, ship, shipes, shipe, shipu, shipa, shipum. You're starting to see a regularity there for the dative plural. It is always in Old English an ending. That's one of the, okay, good, I don't have to memorize that. I know it's if it's a dative plural. Okay, and then O-stems, these feminine nouns we have as examples. We have cheru and bridge, grief and bridge as example words. So we have cheru. Let's just read these. Cheru, cere, 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 cera, cera, cerum. Okay. By the way, don't feel that you have to memorize these. You will always have your book available to check. But just be aware that, okay, where do I go? Where do I go to look for the genitive plural of the word ceru? Okay, so you can go to the book or you can go to your notes. And then we have bridge, which is almost the same as today's word bridge, but it has this u, which is a high rounded front vowel, u. Remember, we practiced producing it by saying first say e and then round your lips while saying e, bridge, bridge. Okay, and it has unrounded over the history, so we lost this wonderful vowel. So let's read this: bridge, brudge, 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 brudja, brudja, brudjum. It barely shows there, but it is that it's that dative plural that was always the same. So you see a lot of repeated endings: accusative singular, genitive singular, dative singular, all look the same. Now this is like a recipe for the system to collapse, because if you don't have maximum distinctions between these cases, what good is this case system anymore? So that's what actually happened as part of the process. It was not the only reason, but anyway, it was part of the reason. So so now we've looked at the strong masculine, neuter, and feminine examples of each of these categories, and let's then look at the weak nouns. This is also called the declension because the kept being repeated. So we've got an example from masculine, the word nama. Guess what that means? Nama. Name. Erhe is a body part. I. And earthe. Earth. Yes, very good. So you will see that this keeps getting repeated. That's why these are called weak nouns. It's a weak declension because it doesn't make these strong differences between the forms. So let's read nama, and it's kind of repetitive, but then you will remember that this is the declension that repeats things. So we have nama, naman, 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 namena, namum. Very good. Neuter, the word for I, and this has the voiced vila fricative in the middle, which we have lost, and I'm pronouncing it with my Finnish accent, so I apologize for all the old English speakers. So erhe, erhe, erhan, 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 erhena, erhum. Much easier, huh? Because we have the same repeated. And neuter, it has the nominative and accusative, they're identical. Then the word for earth, eorde, eordan, 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 eordena, eordum. The grapheme, the letter thorn in the middle, because it's between two voiced sounds, two vowels, not vowels, but an R that is voiced. So let me just write voice, voiced, and voiced. It becomes voiced as well. Of course, it is this is the sound. So F, IPA symbol is the pronunciation, but it was written with a thorn. Yes?
So even since in the weak case, they still, in the plural genitive and plural dative, have the different endings, are we able to assume it was more important to them to distinguish those specifically than for the singular? Like, I don't know what I'm really trying to say, but yeah, don't listen to me. I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, so why the different endings?
But I just think it's interesting that they still keep the plural genitive and just the plural dative. Those are always different, even in the weak case.
Yes, singular versus plural.
Right.
Except for folk and folk.
Right.
Yeah. So different distinctions, important distinctions that languages often make is the into singular, the noun declensions into singular and plural. That's the number distinction. And then the cases, and then the genders. Was this okay? All right. So the final two nouns that we will be looking at are the so-called mutated plural nouns, and we have an example from the masculine word toth. What's the meaning? Toth. O became oo later on. Tooth. So toth is tooth, and then louse is a tiny little insect.
Oh, louse.
Louse, yes. So we have tooth and louse as our example words. And of course, what is the present day English plural of tooth?
Teeth.
Teeth. Present day English plural for louse? Lice. Okay, have you ever wondered why? Stayed up awake, wondering why in the world do we have these weird plurals? Well, you'll get the explanation, because those were the old English plurals, and these were I put on a PowerPoint last week about an explanation about the IJ mutation or front mutation, also called umlaut. So IJ mutation, which changed the root vowel of the word into a higher and more fronted position. So this is what has happened in these mutated words, mutated plurals, teeth and loose. So let's repeat these toth. And now the thorn, because it's at the end of the word, it's pronounced with the voiceless theta. So toth, toth, tothes, teth, teth, totha, tothum. Okay, so I think I mispronounced that. Totha, it's a voiced sound in the middle there. So we have toth, toth, tothes, teth, teth, totha, tothum. Okay, and today we still have tooth and teeth. So this is where we go back. And the feminine example, lose, 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 or there are some variant forms like lose also. Then the dative lose, and the plural lose, lusa, lusum. Okay, so and some scribbles there at the bottom. The plural, this is a tidbit about the plurals. The Old English plural for children, of course is today we would say it's an irregular plural. It was actually not irregular in Old English. It was in the form children. So child is the singular, and then the plural was children. There were some of these plurals with the R there, and that was the plural of children. And now we have children because it developed so that we kept the Old English but then we added the weak unending an ending there over the centuries, and we write it with an e and pronounce it with a schwa or just a syllabic n. But this is an interesting word because it actually has two Old English plural endings, in the same way as if a child would talk about feet. So here's feet is already plural, but then sticking a regular ending there at the end. It's the same phenomenon. So children would have been already plural, but then somebody had the bright idea of making it sure that we're talking about many children, that two plural endings there. Well, that was just a little tidbit, and I'm going to have to let you go. But in the handout that I gave to you, you've got this. Read it carefully because it talks about when to use a nominative. You use it for subject, complement after the verb be, like he is a teacher. A teacher would be in the nominative case. And also when you are using the vocative, when you're talking like, teacher, I have a question, then you would use that. Genitive, 5 different functions. Dative, 6 different functions for the dative case. And for accusative, 3 different functions. Read it carefully before you start doing the exercise. This is not graded. It's just, for your edification and have some practice. It's easier to understand these and I will post the answers on Friday, by the end of Friday. So do it before and then check your answers, and then there's another exercise there posted already, exercise number 2. Okay, thanks for coming here and have a good day.